How do you feel or even explain when you find verses in the Bible that are talking about killing babies? Psalm 137 has that verse. My name is Gray. I am going through the book of Psalms. We are looking at Psalm 137. We don't have an author, but what we know is that it is written at the time when the Israelites were in Babylon in exile. And the theme of the chapter is just really a lament to God to remember them and to remember their enemies as well. So let's jump in and let's see what the Lord has for us in this chapter. It starts out with "By the rivers of Babylon." If you're old enough, you would know that song. So verse 1 and 3 is the author is just drawing the picture of where they are by the rivers of the Babylon, and they're so depressed, they're not singing their songs, they've hung their harps, but their captors, the Babylonians, are actually mocking them and says, sing us a joyful song. But how do you sing a joyful song when you are in a foreign land, when you're a captive? Some of us might say that it really is a good time. As a matter of fact, it is. When you're depressed, when you're in troubles, there's no better time than to sing a song of praise that lifts you up, but also gives you a different perspective to what you're going through. So verse 1 and 3, they're crying out to that, and verse 4 to 6, it feels like he's turning around and doesn't want to give up on hope, because he says, if I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. So he's using Jerusalem as a point of reference, but really it's not only Jerusalem, but it is Zion and the promises that came with being in Jerusalem. Is God's promise, God's covering. And he's saying that, may my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. He doesn't want to forget God's promises. But at the same time, he's saying, I cannot sing the Lord's song. I can't sing a joyful song while being in captivity. And from verse 7 to 9, he's talking about is crying out to God and asking God, remember my enemies. He says the Edomites, when our houses and were being torn down, they were standing in the sides and cheering the Babylonians. And then he looks at the Babylonians and says, look, the things that you did to us, happy is the one who repays you. Verse 8 says, daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you've done for us. Saying that the person who goes and revenges on our behalf, do God's will on our behalf, is the one who will be happy. Now, verse 9 is that very controversial verse that says, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Being in the Bible, being a verse in the Bible, immediately we always think, and a lot of people have used this against us Christians, saying, how can you worship a God who says these things about children? But let's remember, when we read in the Bible, we need to use wisdom. We need to use, not wisdom, but just use common sense. Whatever you're reading, you don't take things out of context. We look at the whole picture. We look at how it's written and from whose perspective it's written. 137 is showing us a heart of someone who is bitter, who is in captivity, and who's crying out to God. It does not necessarily say that that's what God is saying just because it's in the Bible. We always have to remember that. And one thing I love about the Psalms more specifically, it doesn't hide the emotions. This is one place in the Bible where you find the raw emotions of the writer laid bare. The writer is crying out to God and saying, God, these people did this to us. We pray that someone also does the same thing to them. So the Babylonians took the Israelites' children and dashed them against the rocks. And that's why he's saying, happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. And that's what happened. And so he's turning around and saying, for the same thing that you did to us, I pray someone does the same to you. So not necessarily that God is condoning this, but this just shows us true emotion of what's happening. A lesson for us is when you cry out to God, you tell him exactly how you feel. so long as you are talking to God. But here's a reminder in Romans 12, verse 17. It says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Really is just emphasizing the point that yes, you have your emotions. Yes, you can speak them out, speak them to God, but it ends there. You leave them in the hands of God, not that you will go ahead and do them. So Psalm 137, someone crying out to God who is bitter about where they are and also bitter about how they were treated by their enemies, is crying out to God for vengeance. And that's what it is. Not necessarily saying God is saying that, yeah, let's go kill the babies. It's showing the heart of someone who's crying out to God. It is as if you was written down your prayer and showing it to God. It does not say that's what God does. That's Psalm 137. God bless you.